Okay, so in this video, information architecture is probably not the best or the most exciting topic, but it's definitely the most needed topic to discuss, especially from an Office 365 modern SharePoint general strategy. We talked several times in previous videos the power of the out-of-the-box web parts, which is why we as SharePoint professionals or consultants or senior employees, we don't have to customize SharePoint as we used to. But the biggest question is going to be, what is the right information architecture? What is the right balance needed that enables you and your content managers to leverage the most out of the out-of-the-box web parts and configure them to solve some of the most common business requirements. And in this video, we're going to touch on that. So if you look at my screen, what you would see here is that this would be the Tesla Internet homepage, so to speak. And in this carousel, we're pulling from a variety of different sites, but only those articles that are tagged as featured. And as we scroll down, you would notice that there is a variety of different news articles and information on the homepage. Where things get really interesting, if I go to the Model S site, here I'm going to have all the details related to the Model S model and the product team that's working on this particular model. But notice how I have competitor models and performance competition highlighted here as well as some of the articles that's pulling not only articles from this particular Model S site, but also articles from a project that's dealing with a certain feature that is featured in the Model S. So again, this is going to show you how with the right information architecture, you can pull data from not only just the sites within the hub, but be very selective from project sites that are sitting outside of the hub. In this scenario, the project site actually sits on Microsoft Teams. And here at the bottom, you would notice that these are actually documents being managed by the competitor team or the team that does analysis on the competition on a single site outside of the hub, not part of the internet, but they're using our information architecture to tag these documents as well as events, as well as news articles, to be able to use and leverage this in a cross-functional way that's very popular to the organization. I'm calling this the $1 million information architecture strategy. It's really up to you to see if this lives up to the hype. But either way, there's a lot to unpack here, so let's get started. Okay, so let me show you this really simple process on creating an information architecture that you can get a lot of mileage out of it. I actually think it's worth $1 million for any organization. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't, but let's get into it and see how it works. So here we are in the whiteboard. What I have here is so basically all you're going to do is set up a base content type. And I showed this concept in the previous video, but I don't think I was watching it the other day, and I don't think I was clear as it could that I could have been. And what we're going to do, we're just going to break it down, and then we're actually going to see it in practice, this $1 million architecture strategy. So you're going to have this base content type, and within the content type, you're just going to have 3 site columns you're going to get a ton of mileage out of. So you're going to have one that's going to be an is featured flag. You're going to have another site column that's going to be tied to the term store. And then you're going to have a third site column that's just going to be an open selection choice column, a choice column without any predefined options. So you're going to leave that open so you can define those in the various site collections where it's needed. This is coming from the content type hub because you want this to be available. And really, I'm not concerned with the content type. That's irrelevant. The content type is only a vehicle to get these 3 site columns down to each and every site collection within my entire tenant, right? So once I have that, now I can have a site collection for the home page, and that may be my content, my site collection hub. And then I'm gonna have the various site collections for the various department sites, or in the concept of, or in the context of Tesla, maybe a model site or an HR site or marketing, charging station, any of the Model S, Model 3, XYZ, any of the vehicles, the gigafactories, you name it, they're going to have a site represented on the intranet. And not only will the site columns be available for all my sites that represent my intranet hub, I also may have these site collections available to the various Microsoft Teams sites that are available for every Microsoft team that's spun up. And really what I'm looking at is the SharePoint piece of that Microsoft team. All right, so let's see this in practice. Let's go ahead and build this out. There's gonna be a lot of pausing in this video because when you're dealing with the content type hub, there's a lot of latency and lag for things to be made available. But we're gonna take our time, we're gonna pause the video. By the time you see it, it should be pretty streamlined and everything just kind of be stitched together, but that's the reality. All right, so here we are gonna be in the SharePoint Admin Center. And basically, they kind of move things around because everything kind of got modernized since the last time I shot this video. And basically, what you want to do is go to your content type gallery. Within the content type gallery, because this is in the context of Tesla, let's just go ahead and create a content type, and let's just call this. And I'm going to go ahead and I think I already have a category for Tesla. It's a really, really good idea to put all your custom content types, all your custom site columns into an organization name category, or these used to be called groups back in the day before things kind of got modernized and fancy. Now, when you look at the base type, basically I'm going to base this off the list and then the item content type as its base parent. Again, this is irrelevant because all I'm doing is just using this as a vehicle to get everything from a central location down to each and every site collection within the tenant. So that way my values, my consistent set of values are going to be made available to me. So let's just go ahead and create that content type. All right. So it looks like I already have a base content type. Let's just see. Let's just look at this one. Yep. I already have a base content type, and let's just create this one from, let's just create an element. Let's call it base 2. All right, so now that we have our base content type, now let's go ahead and drop in our 3 site columns. So the first one we want to create is the is feature. And what I want to do is make sure that all of my custom columns that I create it with a unique prefix that's designed for the organization. So in this case, it's going to be Tesla. So let's just do TSL. That's going to be my prefix. And I'm going to do is feature. And you will see why this is super important as you kind of build these out, right? And once we need to start to select these unique prefixes will really come in handy as we go to configure these in the out-of-the-box web parts. And you can see how that's going to unfold here in a second. So here I already have a category for Tesla. Let's go ahead and add it to Tesla. I'm going to make this a yes, no. My default is going to be no. And then I'm going to say that that's my first column. The second column I want to create is a choice column. So again, do it my prefix of TSL, and let's just call this category. So this is going to be my Tesla category. Again, go ahead and drop that into my Tesla category or group. And this is going to be a choice option. And I'm going to leave these generic. I'm going to leave these generic choice 1, 2, and 3 because I want to leave room for my site owners to define what they need to define in the context of their site or in the context of their solution. But at least we're going to have a global consistent site column name, which is going to equate to a managed property name during configuration. That's going to be available everywhere we go within the tenant. And let's just go ahead and save that off. Okay. The last one is going to be the term store. Now let's go ahead, and this is going to be a managed property. So let's just call this Tesla. Let's just call this the Tesla tags. And this is, again, going to be a part of my category. And this is going to be a managed metadata. And then I'm gonna go ahead and select the term set for this. Now, I probably should have went ahead and created this term set beforehand, but for right now, I'm gonna just go ahead and select this generic Tesla 123. And then I'm gonna go ahead and save that off as my Tesla tag. Now, ideally what I want to do, now these are my internal names. I can go back behind here and touch these again and give these very nice friendly names. And this is where the gotcha really comes in. So I want to rename this, but that option, for whatever reason, is not available in the modern UI of the term store or the content type gallery. So what I want to do is switch over to the classic mode, and then this is going to allow me to go ahead and touch these and give it a different name. So I'm just go ahead and call this is featured. And now I'm in this classic view. I can filter by my various groups. And let's go ahead and rename this one to category. And some of these may have reserved names, even though this is the display name. It may error out. I know category is probably one that's real popular. Yep, it said this name is already exists. So I'm gonna just do something like a Tesla category for that one. And then the last one I want to name is going to be the tags. And then just for kicks and giggles, let's just go ahead and name this one Tesla tags. Okay, so now that I have everything down, now what I want to do is navigate to the term store and create a real structure, a real term set that I want to tag my Tesla tags to. So with that, I'm gonna just go ahead right here in SharePoint Admin under the content services. Again, everything's been modernized, so things are going to look a little bit different than what we're used to with SharePoint on-prem or previous versions of SharePoint. But here I can go ahead and create a group. So let's just go ahead and create a new group, and let's just call this the Tesla group. And then within there, we're going to create one that's called a term set called tag. Now with these tags, I can get this is where the magic comes in, and you have a lot of flexibility here. So we're going to start off a very simple, very baseline, and basically create some of the most common tags or popular tags within the organization. So under here, I may want a parent tag called models, and then within the models, I'm going to specify all the various model vehicle models. Okay, so now that I have my models, those are going to be some of the key models here. And we love the term store because as they come out with new models here at Tesla, we can continue adding the different versions as the market takes us or the future takes us where we're going. So, and that's the beauty of adding things in the term store. And you just add it in one central spot, and everywhere that tag column is being used, the next time your content manager goes in to go in to tag a document, tag a news article, tag an event, these latest tags will be available to them as we kind of rename them or deprecate them or add new items to the list. Now, the next thing we want to do is add another parent tag, and we're going to call this one the charging station. Okay, so now I have my charging stations, and I have the various superchargers, destination charger, home, third party, and other generic charging accessories. And I have my models. So now I can do other things that are probably common that you may see are locations. Now, when it comes to locations, not only will we have our standard locations, so not only do we have our standard locations, we also have our Gigafactory. And you will notice that now I am in another level within the term store to where now I can group all of my Gigafactories under the parent term Gigafactory. So I have Giga New York, I have Giga Shanghai, and I have Giga Berlin. Okay, so you can see how under just this one generic tag, I can now present not only a few other tags, but I can group them by category and those that are like, and I can also expand this out to be different colors. So I understand that for all of my models, I may have various colors. So now let me create another tag, and let's just call this colors. And this is going to have all of the basic colors within the Tesla brand. Okay, so with this structure here, it actually poses a lot of flexibility, and I'm going to show you here how that's flexible here in a second. So now let's go ahead and update our Tesla base content type in all of the columns and our tag column that we have in that base content type. So if I go to the base content type, let's go to the tags, and I have to switch over to the classic experience. And now what I can do is reset the, well, that's unfortunate. It doesn't seem like you can change them. Well, I guess we're scrapping this and redoing it. So let's go here and delete this guy. We should have created our term store first. Lessons learned, create the term store first. And then once you have your term set and all your terms created, then go in and create the site column. Oh, it looks like you can modify them. I was in the, oh, I know what I did. So I was going to the site column through the content type, but if you go to the site column directly, then this is what I was looking for, the ability to edit this. So now I'm gonna change it from this BU term set, and I'm gonna go to our new tags term set, and this is what I'm gonna go ahead and tag it. And now once my content managers, once they have access to all these site columns, now they have the ability to, okay, so now we have our tag fixed. There's another scenario I want to show, but I'm going to save that till later in the video, to where you can pick and choose any structure within that hierarchy. So say, for example, you want to create, within this base content type, you want colors to be a standalone. And so what you can do, and we might as well go ahead and do it here. So what you can do, let's just go ahead and create a new column. And again, let's just give it our prefix, and let's just call it colors. Drop it into the category that we expect. This is going to be a managed property. And then here we're going to select the term set. So expand out the Tesla group, expand out the text term set. And now we want to just select colors. And that's going to pick up our colors right there in that hierarchy structure. And now we have a designated column just focused on the colors only. And this really gives you the best of both worlds. And you can keep expanding this out, right, you can create one for models. You can create one for the charging stations. You can create one for interiors. You can create one for locations, ... So you can keep expanding out and getting very granular and give the content manager the best of both worlds. So you can do tags to where you have access to everything, or you can get very focused and structured and really hone in on the colors and allow them to mix and match between the two. Okay, so let's just go ahead and give this a more friendly name. So let's go ahead and edit this, scroll down to the classic experience. It seems like this is the only way we're able to modify these names. So that's going to be our Tesla colors. And then our final step, now that we have all of our columns that we want added, let me just click refresh so that way we're seeing the latest and greatest. And now what we want to do is go ahead and publish this out to where it's available to each and every site collection within the tenant. So here I'm gonna just go ahead and click publish. Because this is the first time that I'm publishing this is gonna be my option. Then I click save. If I'm making modifications to this base content type, say for example, what we talked through, adding additional columns for different strategic sections within the tags hierarchy, we can add those columns. But now once that's done, once this is published and we're doing updates, you would see this option to say republish, and then that would push the updates down. So since this is the first time we're pushing this out, let's just go ahead and select publish. That's going to go ahead and get that percolating down. This is going to take a while, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. I'll check it probably within 20 minutes or so, and then we'll resume and see how this all works in practice. Okay, so I actually fell asleep, so I didn't really track how much time it took for site columns to get published down to every site collection, but it's been probably 12 hours on my site since the last time I checked. So now that we go into this, I can go to any one of these site collections, and these are all different site collections, go to the site content section, and basically what I have available to me now is all of those site columns for each and every list and library and pages library. So if I go to site pages library, where all of our pages and articles are stored, and we can use this for tagging. I can now go down to add from the existing site column and filter on our category, the Tesla category. And as you can see here, all of our tags are going to be available to us for tagging. So I can go ahead and bring in the Tesla tags, which is going to be manage metadata. Then Tesla category, which is going to be open option. So that way every site owner can specify the various categories within the context of their particular site. And then we can have a flag for the is feature. So once I have everything selected, go ahead and select OK. And now what I can do for my existing pages, I can click in for existing pages and articles and tag them accordingly. So let's just look at this sample entry. This is going to be based on the Model 3. So then I can click edit and go to page details. And then right here, this is going to be all of my property pane. So for the Tesla model, I can go ahead and specify that. For the various tags, I can click the tag icon and get the hierarchical tree, right? And then select the Model 3 from here as well. Now, this Tesla models, I can't remember if this was already, I think this was already there. So this is our new guide. So the Tesla tag, and I apologize for this because I went through a lot of these taggings and information architecture for this site. So there's a lot of start and stop and other initiatives. But the one we want to focus on is the Tesla tag. Now, we can also flag this as is featured. So we can set that to yes. And basically what that's going to do, not only is this going to be tagged as Model 3, but maybe on the home page, I want to bring in all the Model 3 information or Model S information or Cybertruck information, but only the ones that are flagged as featured with our feature on the home page. So here I can give this one some special treatment. I give it a tag to say this is related to this particular model, but I also can give it an is feature flag just to let it know that this is something available for the homepage or however you want to use that, right? So let me do this. Let me pause this video, go ahead and tag these various articles and pages as such based on their models, and then flag a few of them as featured. And then we resume the video and show how the configuration. Okay, so I went through and tagged a fair amount of articles with various tags. So basically what I've done, I went through some of the site collections here. So each one of the model sites have their own site collection. Went and configured my site pages library with the needed tags. So now what that allows me to do is for any given article, once I'm on the page details, I can go ahead and tag these as such. And it became pretty easy for the most part, especially with the ability to type ahead. So we understand that, especially with the Tesla tag, that's going to be a hierarchy of several different categories of tags, right? So you have the various charging stations, colors, locations, models, so on and so forth. So instead of having to navigate that tree each and every time, I can just come here and simply just start typing the word Model S. It will figure out what term I'm looking for within the tree and allow me to leverage that type ahead. That really saved a ton of time. The other thing I noticed is that once you establish these tags, especially for news articles, this not only speaks to the tags, but also speaks to the layout. Is the ability to save the page as a template. And when you save it as a template, not only does it save the layout and then some of the default images, but it also saves the page configuration or the tag configuration. So if I'm in a Model S site, I probably want to go ahead and create templates related to the Model S, and that template will already be primed and tagged with all of the right details that are needed. The other thing that I've played around with was the fact that these tags are available in the Microsoft Teams site. So if I go to, let's just say, for example, this department site here. Now, this is very interesting, and this dawned on me once I went through and started configuring. We understand that for Microsoft Teams, there is a SharePoint door related to the files stored in Teams. And it's a full-blown SharePoint site. So you can, you have ability to create news articles, quick links, of course, store your documents, your notebooks, your planner, and all this other good stuff. Now, but look at this interesting concept. What I've done here with this technology department, again, this is going to be my inner technology department, but I maybe want to broadcast some news articles related to certain products that this department is working on. So technology is really centered on minimum design for the dashboard and some of the interior, as well as the tire and the aerospace dynamics for the big tires, related to all the models. So it could be Cybertrucks or whatever. But I don't want to give everyone in the organization access to this site, but I do want to tag certain articles and have them surface up in different areas of the intranet or the entire tenant where those tags are being referenced. So in order to do that, what I've done, I went to the site contents down to the site pages library and under settings. And of course, I went through the steps that we walked through before, where I added the needed columns to that particular library. But I also went through permissions and broke inheritance for this particular library, so that way not only would the members and the owner of the Microsoft team still have access, but I also wanted to grant everyone in the organization read access only to this library. So I didn't compromise the security of my Microsoft Teams per se for this particular department, but I did open it up to where now I can create announcements coming from this department and tag them as such, so that way they can be available to other users in the organization. Now understand that I can still do this tagging and not even remove this external users or the everyone group. And I can still do this tagging. And what this would do, and this is another interesting scenario that you can leverage, is that only the members and the owners of this particular department would then see those announcements if I remove the everyone access. And basically what that means is that, say for example, let me go back to the intranet and let's go over to the Cybertruck section. And for this news article area here, this can be configured to show everything that are tagged with Cybertruck. So let's just go ahead and do this, because this is going to start to spill into how do you configure and how do you create a strategy now to leverage all of these tags. Now the fact that we have these tags tenant-wide and globally available for everything SharePoint within the tenant. So here for this particular announcement or news web part, what I'm going to do is instead of selected sites, I'm going to allow the algorithm to determine the right article for the current user. And I'm also going to go down to my filter section, go to manage properties, and remember that prefix that we put on each and every column, the TLS prefix. Notice how that becomes into play now, because these managed properties, there's hundreds if not thousands of managed properties for the entire tenant. And this dropdown is going to make any available managed property that is using the tag on content. That's a key distinction to make. You have to have a piece of content using the tag, not just the tag defined, not the site column defined, but you actually have to have the value being tagged on a piece of content for it to show up here in this dropdown. So if you have these configured and you're trying to type or find a managed property and you can't find it, just go back and tag some content with that managed property and the value, give it a few minutes, and then all of a sudden this will pop up. Now, everything that's related to our $1 million strategy with information architecture is going to show up here. It looks like I'm missing one of the is featured one, but that's neither here or there. So here's my tag. You do want to use the contains, not equals. And then I'm going to just simply type in Cybertruck, which is the term name within the term store. The reason why you have to use contains, because under the hood, what's happening is that not only do you have the term name, you also have the GUID related to the term. So all of that's going to be meshed together. So you're not going to get an exact match using equals, and you have to use contains in that way. Now, once I do contains, and again, I'm using the source where I'm allowing the algorithm to determine the right news for the particular user, and the only restriction I have is that it must have the word Cybertruck, or must be tagged with Cybertruck. And this is going to be my experience for me, because as a Deshaun Clark profile, I have access to the technology, and technology is actually flagged for everyone. Back to my original point, if I remove that everyone group, Deshaun Clark, would still be able to view this article, because I also have access to the technology group department, as well as other Cybertruck or other sources that these articles would come from. So my view is going to be different than someone who does not have access, with the understanding that all these tags, though they can be sourced from any and every SharePoint site within the tenant, everything's still going to be security trimmed, and security is still going to be top of mind. Right? So that's one scenario. So what I've done here, I have this Cybertruck site. Now this is going to source anything related to Cybertruck across the entire tenant, allowing the algorithm to determine the best article for the current user based on the signals that the current user is pulling off. Now you can also, here on the home page, you can now go in and configure certain things as needed. And this is where things get a little interesting, and we have these small distinctions that make a world of difference, but it's good to have and understand how this works. So what we want to do, we want to dedicate this part of the site to the various models in general. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and edit this. So let me go ahead and edit this news web part. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and say all sites in the hub. So all of my models are actually going to be joined to the hub. And I want to filter this on the information that's coming from the models only. So again, I do my TSL prefix for Tesla, select my tag, and then I'm going to say contains, and then I'm going to just go ahead and list out all of my models here. Okay, so I didn't go through and list out all of the models, but I think I have enough just to kind of get the point across. There's a couple of distinctions to make here. When you're specifying the same managed property name, the values get treated as an or versus an and. So basically what it's saying is bring up any article that has the tag Model S or Model X or Cybertruck. And I can really simplify this because I am using the contains. Let me just do model, and this should pick up all the other models. So the Model Y, the Model 3, so on and so forth, because that's just going to be generic. And once I have that, I can actually probably remove this one and really just go with this configuration, and anything that's really starting with the word model is going to get picked up, and then as well as Cybertruck, and I probably can do another one for the roster, and then I will have full coverage for all of my models. Now, notice that with that filter combination that I have, the source plays another huge critical role here. Because I'm sourcing everything that's tied to the hub, this hub is really designed for intranet sites only. So my sites are things that are happening in my Microsoft Teams sites, if they're not associated to the hub, would not be in play here. Now, if I did want to consider everything, then I can select the recommended for the current user. And then as you can see here with this SSS charger, that's a team site. The department technology, that's a team site. And it starts to consider all site collections within the tenant in the lens of the algorithm based on the current user. So for our intents and purposes, we want a little bit of consistency here. We want to be a little bit more intentional on the articles that we have, because we only want those coming from the hub and those who are generating activity and articles within the hub network, and they have these tags. That was nasty, the fact that it erased everything. So let me just go ahead and add these back in really quickly. Okay, so I went ahead and add my filters in. So this is going to give me a nice view across all my models, everything that's happening across all my different model sites related to one of these models or Cybertruck. Okay, so the other thing we probably want to do let's do this now. Let's create an area, and this is the power that you have, right? So let's create an area. Let's just do a 1/3 right, and within here we're going to create a carousel. So I just grab another news, and for this one we want to do the carousel. Let's just put about 5 articles in there. Let's have it automatically cycle through, and then about 5 seconds between each cycle. Now what I want to do for this one, I want to select my managed property for my is featured. So I started typing the word. And again, this is me practicing and playing around within this lab tenant. Ideally, your scenario will not be this noisy, but for our intents and purposes, we want the is feature item, and we want where it equals to a 1. Now, this is another small distinction, but it's one of those things that will get you tripped up until you understand or watch this video and understand what's happening behind the scenes. Because we use a yes/no column, that becomes a binary value, meaning that it's a 0 or a 1. And if it equals a 1, that means it's flagged as is feature. And what we want to do is only bring those in for the selected hub, right? So again, we're being very intentional on what we want to show here. When it comes to the carousel, it's probably a good idea to drop the, I keep having to do these refreshes here. It's getting a little confused here. But for the carousel, it's probably a good idea to drop the title in the commands. And that's just going to give a much cleaner look when it comes to displaying that carousel in this way. All right. So now we have our articles here. We probably want to select a different layout just because we're sharing this space with the carousel. But that's neither here or there. I think the intent and purpose is clear and it's understood that now you have a lot of flexibility with how you're leveraging these tags and positioning articles on the page itself. Now, another thing that we probably want to do, maybe I want to dedicate this because the Cybertruck is one of the hottest things that's happening right now. So I want to leverage this to say Cybertruck news. And now I can go and modify this to say only bring in Cybertruck information. And I'm gonna leverage this to use the recommendation for the current user. But again, I want to specify the Cybertruck filter. Okay, so now that's done. That's only going to pull in Cybertruck news, but it's going to pull it in from any site within the tenant, and it's going to be security trim. So again, you're only going to see what you're supposed to see and nothing more than what you have access to see. All right. Now let's talk about the tagging. You know, we talked about a little bit the tags and creating page templates where your tags are going to be primed and ready to go. But another thing that you can leverage is that when you go to site contents and site pages, you can set default values to where your tags are automatic. So because we're in the Cybertruck site, I can now go into settings, and we're only using this Tesla tag to determine the Cybertruck news or tag. And now what I can do is just go down here in the default value for this particular library and specify that. Note the flexibility that you have with the site columns coming from the content type hub. You have flexibility to, I can even change the display name here, even though my internal name is still going to be that TSL tag internal name. But I can make it more meaningful for this site owner to where, you know, when they're looking at this view, maybe the Tesla category need a different name because they're going to specify the values there, or maybe the Tesla tag needs a different name within this context. So you can modify that as well. But I love the fact that, on the library, every library can have their own default value to where it makes sense for them. So it's the same scenario. So if I go to Model S and the gear icon here, and then here on my site pages, I'm in the Model S site. So now I want to default everything here to use the Model S value for the tag. again, these are different tips and techniques to where you can leverage to where you say you're in this site, everything in the site or all the articles in this particular site should be tagged as such. So that way, if your users or your content manager is not using the templates for the page or whatever the scenario may be, as soon as they generate a new article or post for this particular site, it's going to be tagged accordingly. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to take a look at other scenarios that you may run into. So let's look at documentation. So if I look at this Model S site, ideally what we want to do when we talk about the drawings or any Model S documents, we will want these to automatically surface documents, and they could be Word documents. So you can get into the document type. So if you want to do, I want to see all the Model S PowerPoint decks. So now what I can do, I can configure this to be a Model S PowerPoint. That would be my document type. And now leverage my Tesla tag to only bring in documents tagged as Model S. And based on the source, right, you can now say, I want to limit that tagging requirement to only this site, or only document libraries that are associated to this hub, or only document libraries within the tenant. So no restriction on the source. The only restriction would be security trimming. But as long as it has a Model S tag and it's a PowerPoint deck, I want that to surface up here. And that's what we're going to do next. So let me just go ahead and tag a few documents, and then we'll walk through that configuration. Okay, so now in this section of the video, what we're going to do is how do we leverage our IA, our $1 million IA strategy, to be leveraged against documents, right? So imagine this scenario where I'm in a site that's irrelevant to the other model sites or the various department sites or even project sites. And this particular site or this particular library manages all of the analysis or the market analysis documents for the industry. And what we want to do is take all of these competitor models and vehicles and all the details and specs on these vehicles and match them to or tag them to the relevant model that they are, in a competition for. And not only do we want to tag it for the relative model, we're going to add another dimension to these analysis documents on what are we comparing? Are we comparing the comfort of the interior? Are we comparing the body style, or is it performance? Or is it an EV versus an EV, or high performance gas versus an EV, so on and so forth. So you can see how, based on these business requirements, you can start to layer different attributes. And how does our information architecture, our 3 site columns, marry up to this? So what we're going to do, this is a standard library, and it has, as you can see here, 985 files. And what we're going to do is just go to the library settings, as we did with the site pages, add in our site columns. So again, just filter on the Tesla category, and these are the ones we have to choose from. Now, we want to bring in tags because we want a finite list of options from the term store. We also want to bring in the category because we want to create our set of options that are in the context of this analysis documents. And that's the big difference between the two. So these are enterprise-wide terms that are going to be consistent across the organization. These are terms that everyone are speaking and they're understood, like Model S, Model X. Those are not going to change. And when you say Cybertruck, you only mean one particular thing. Whereas the Tesla categories are going to be contextual. So in our analysis documents, we want to bring in comparison for the console, comparison for body style, so interior comfort, so on and so forth. So those we need to a lot of flexibility, but because it's the same site column enterprise-wide, when we go to leverage, excuse me, this information's getting me choked up. But when we go to leverage, even the variation in the naming of the category, the site column is consistent, and we leverage the out-of-the-box configuration. We have a consistent name that we can target, even though the value may vary and may be contextual depending on the context of the scenario. So with all of that, let's just go ahead and add in these 2 columns. And let me show you something else. And I just realized this just playing around with it. This really starts to, it's the gift that keeps giving, right? Because this really starts to show the flexibility. A couple of things I want to show you. So when I go into the Tesla tags, this is going to highlight this for me. Once you're in the detail of the column for the Tesla tags, there's a couple of things I want to bring to your attention. One, you can set this right here on the setting for this particular library that you want to allow for multiple values. Again, that's just a use case scenario to where you're tagging, you may want them to choose only one value from the whole hierarchy or list of tags that we have here, or you want to set it up the flexibility to select multiple. So I want to bring that to your attention. So you have that flexibility at the library setting or the list setting when you're using these tags. The other thing is you can specify where in the hierarchy you want to limit this particular scenario for your list of library. So you remember when we configured this at the content type hub, we said, okay, here's the term set, and they can select anything within the term set for this particular column. We also created a column that was honed in for a particular area within the term set where, I think we had one that's called models, and we set it to the parent term for models, and we kind of focused on or limit their options to only that. Even here with the tags, you can get more granular and say, okay, for this particular scenario, for this library, I really just want them to focus on models, and I don't want to leverage that other model site column. So I want to be consistent with the enterprise term, Tesla tag term, to highlight this. But I don't want my content managers to be all over the place and mistakenly start to select, locations or gigafactories. I really want them to use this for models. And again, this kind of speaks to the flexibility you have even with the display name, to where you can say, I'm focusing, even though I'm using the tag column, in this scenario, you can do select multiple, so your comparison could be applied to a Model 3 and a Model S. So I'm allowing you to select multiple, but I'm focusing you on models only, okay? And then we can talk about the default value here, because I think there's a lot of richness and capabilities that you have there. Now we have that set. The other thing we want to do is to get more granular with our categories, right? So let's just call this the comparison type, right? And again, just giving it a display name that's contextual for how we're going to use it. And I have here the various types that we want to use or compare it against, right? And I don't want a default value at this level, and then I'm gonna go ahead and select OK. So now we have all that set. If you look at your analysis document library, now I can right click on one of these, look at the details, and within the detail panel, I can start to select my various selections. So here I'm gonna just select my model. This is in comparison to the Model X, as well as the Model S, which is an interesting comparison. And we're comparing the interior comfort, right? And you can see how things are starting to get tagged. Now, with the richness of the modern library, I can select multiple, right click, and then go to properties. And now what I can impact, these 9 or 10 that I have selected, I would say, you know what, all of these models here, this competitor is a direct comparison on the Model S, and we're comparing it against performance. Okay, so again, you see how these are very, very flexible on how you can start tagging. Now, one of the things I love about document libraries, especially the folders in document library, is leveraging one of the settings or features within the library that's been around since forever. I wouldn't say even SharePoint 2010, maybe 07. And it's setting the default value for a particular folder as far as metadata. And you do that by going again to the library settings, and there's an option here called the column default value setting. You select that, and then for each one of these, you can, for any folder, you can highlight that folder, And this will show you all the columns that are available for you to configure as a default value. And you come in and you set the default value for a particular folder. Now, in this scenario, I have these green gear icons because I was in here prepping for this video and setting a lot of these default values. But, that's why, you see that, for the Tesla models, I can come in and then I already have the default value set to the Model X. So let's just do the one from scratch. So if I go into Cybertruck, I can go for models. And I love the fact that this is a managed metadata column type, because for choice columns, you have to remember the exact spelling of the value that you want to default. Whereas the managed metadata column type gives you the hierarchical tree to then you can go ahead and select what you need from the list. So here, this is going to be Cybertruck. So anything in this folder, I want that to default to Cybertruck, and that should do the trick for us. Okay. So now I get the green gear icon, and I'm ready to rock and roll. Now there are some caveats on how this works, right? So let's say, for example, let's go down to some BMWs. So let's just pick on the Z8 and the Z4. And I want to go ahead and move these, right? And I love the modern SharePoint, especially the modern libraries. And I want to go to the current library, and I want to move these to the Cybertruck and say move here. Now, I expect, because I have my default values and all the other stuff highlighted in the Cybertruck, that these, by moving them to this folder, they get tagged with the default value. And if you look at the Tesla models, that column is still empty. Right, so that's one of the caveats. That default value only applies when you're uploading to that folder, right? Which is nice, right? Because sometimes, we're taking these offline, we're downloading them, or they went through some review or process or approval process, and we have local copies of them, and we just want to upload them to this library. So our upload scenario will account for that document and then automatically do our default tagging, as well as our create new scenario will automatically tag the default value. So what about the move? So that could be a sticking point. Again, because of the modern UI with the modern library, I can select multiple, go to properties, and then from a batch perspective, go ahead and tag these as such. So let's just go ahead and put in Cybertruck. And for everything that I have selected, that's going to automatically select those. I can also modify these in grid view. So if I go into the grid view, and usually when I'm in grid view and I'm doing like a batching tagging scenario, what I love to do is probably create a view that has a limited list of columns that I want to impact. So that way I'm very focused and there's not a lot of noise, and I can position my columns where I need them to be, and then I'm impacting them that way. So just to kind of see this in practice, let's go to the Bentleys, and we want to compare those against the Model X, which is probably no comparison. So here I'm just type in Model X, and this is going to feel like Excel, right? So I just go ahead and select this guy, and then grab it by the cell corner, and then highlight the cells that I want to apply that value to. And then that's going to go ahead and apply the value. It kind of hesitated, and I was like, oh, that's going to be an ultimate demo fail. But it actually applied them. And once you're done, again, this is kind of finicky in the sense that when you're impacting roles, you have to make sure that you select on a role to apply those changes. I've seen scenarios where I selected like multiple, and I stayed in that highlighted state and then did an exit or exit grid view, and my changes did not save. So just make sure that, just playing around with it, you get used to it. But there is some weirdness that, you have to make sure you select off the selection and make sure everything is saving. Sometimes it's helpful and say, hey, you're about to exit, but your changes are not saved yet. Do you want to wait, or do you want to discard? But sometimes it just allows you to go ahead and exit, and you kind of lose that. So just be aware of different weirdness or things like that. So what I'm gonna do, let me pause this video. Let me get a bunch of these tagged, and then let's flip on the other side that show how do we benefit from this tag. Again, this is a scenario where I'm in a totally remote site collection, obviously in the same tenant, But this group is really just focused on market analysis, and they have a handful of documents that they want to tag and compare those against various models. Now what we want to do, and once we come back from this pause break, is to show how can we leverage that in a Model X site that says this is the market analysis, or these are the competitor model making models that the Model X stacks up against, or the Model S stacks up against, and we can figure out, all out of the box and watch this magical thing happen. All right, so let me pause this, let me tag a few, and I'll be back. Okay, so I have a fair amount of documents tagged. It was pretty easy, just doing the select all and properties and doing some batch tagging. So now what we want to do is leverage this analysis library for some of our targeted model sites. So for the Cybertruck, what we want to do, let's say we want to create a new area on this page called the competitor analysis section or whatever. We're going to put this towards the bottom. So let's just go ahead and grab this 2-column section. Let's put a nice background color to help distinguish the two. Now, knee-jerk reaction, you'd probably be looking for the document library web part, right? And the problem with this is this library this web part only considers libraries on the current site. Again, we have a totally remote, disconnected site collection that's managing all of this analysis documents, and we just want to consume that information, but we want to be very targeted on the type, which documents we want. We only want the ones in this scenario related to the Cybertruck. So the document library is not going to help us because it's only in the context of the current site. We want the highlighted content web part, if you spell it correctly. And this is going to be very similar to the Swiss Army knife that we're used to in the previous versions of SharePoint, like the content by query web part or the search results web part. And usually those are the ones that we can get in there and manipulate or customize the query and really kind of fine tune it to get what we want out of the box without any custom dev, right? You kind of have to understand the query language, or in that scenario, camel query, and the syntax and all the other stuff. And this is going to be very similar. So very, very flexible web part. Here you can determine, and we're going to use both of these. We're going to use a custom query. You're going to do the out-of-the-box filter. But you can determine your source. So in our scenario, we want all sites. And this really sets us up, right? So if anyone is using these tags, we want those to come up here. If we really want to focus this in, then we can go to the site where the analysis library is. But we're going to keep this open, say all sites. And we only are interested in documents. And for document type, let's just say any, because we can have a PowerPoint deck, we can have a Visio, we have a PDF that has comparative analysis. So we don't necessarily want to limit it to the Word document. And then from our filter, this is going to be very similar to what we did for news. So we select the managed property and then filter on our TSL prefix. And this is going to give us the available managed properties here. Right, so our available managed properties. So we just go ahead and select the tags. Again, this is the Tesla tag that we're looking for, and then we want to filter this on Cybertruck. And don't forget to make sure this is contained. Because remember, anything tag that you have from the term store is going to include both the GUID and the term name. So you have to use contains to only focus on the term name. All right, and then once this, I'm not a big fan of this tile or grid approach, especially when dealing with documents. I love this view here because it feels like a document library, and of course you can give it any custom title that you want. So from here we can just say competitor models, right? And that's going to be, these are all the models that are the competition models that the Cybertruck is compared to. Now the other thing is we want to, let's just go ahead and copy this and slide this over to the other half of this section layout. We want to compare the competitor market. Right, so who's buying this? The competitor cyber trucks. Which market is this really compared to? When maybe our sales teams, our sales reps are coming up with a strategy on how we want to position the Cybertruck for the marketplace. So who's the competitive markets that we want to target? What type of vehicles are they buying now? So for that, seems pretty straightforward because what we did, and again, just kind of flash back to our document library, what we did, we had two columns. We had one for the models. This is our Tesla tag. And then we had one for the comparison type, and this was our Tesla category, right? And it's very important to remember those internal names. And if you forget, obviously you can go to the library settings, click on the column, look at the URL, and that will give you the internal name, which is what these configuration settings in the managed property are going to be referring to. So in our scenario, just to make sure that we go after the right name and the right value that was given, I'm gonna filter on Cybertruck, and then I can take a view here, but I can also do another filter on target market because I want to get this spelled correctly. So this is going to be target market. So now once we flip over here, now I'm gonna show you the wrong way, then I'm gonna show you the right way to do it. So knee-jerk reaction is to, let me just add in the other managed property, right? So I filter on TSL, which is our prefix. And then from here, this is going to be our Tesla category, right? It has a lot of noise up behind it, but we're used to it by now. And this is going to be our Tesla category. And we want to filter on, what was the value name? Target market. So I just start typing in the word target market, and I can do a contains here. But notice what happens. Now, this is configured, and this is doing what it is, but I have the exact same results on the left. And the reason for that is because this is an OR. And basically what it's doing, it says, okay, give me all of the documents, right, any file that's either has a tag of Cybertruck or has a category with the value target market. And that's not what we want. We want an and. So we want only the documents that have both of these tags, not either one of the tags. And that's when your custom query comes into play. Now, before I switch over to the custom query, there's a couple things that you want to note. And I have this already notated here in my notepad. Basically, you want to type out this property name because you got to use that in the filter, right? And in a spoiler alert, I'm kind of giving you the query that we're going to build. And then you also want to give the managed property name because, again, this is the property name that we need in the filter. And then we're going to break this down once we use it. So once we have that, I'm going to just slide that over to my other window. Now we're ready to use our custom query. In the custom query, basically all it's going to give you is a text box that says, and if you don't know this, do a Google search on SharePoint keyword query language, understand the syntax. This is extremely, extremely powerful on understanding how you can compose different search queries to leverage metadata to bring back very targeted results of what you're looking for. And it's regardless of where it's stored in the tenant, or you can focus it on, again, using the query keyword query language, there is a property name called path to where you can focus on the URL that says, yeah, give me all the results that match this criteria. And you can do ands and ors and parentheses or order of operations of all that. Even not, right? You can say that equals this and this, but not this. So you can do those very complex queries using this KQL language. So this is worth the investment to understand the syntax and how these are put together. All right, so let's kind of break it down. So we want our Cybertruck, and we also want the category to equal market. So, and you have to do all this using the managed metadata or the managed property name. And in our case, it's really ugly because we didn't pretty them up. And you probably want to pretty these up in a real world scenario. So basically, you have the property name, you use the colon, and this is your contains or starts with. And you want to use Cybertruck. And that's going to be our value. And along the way, you can just keep clicking apply, and this will give you real-time results of all your matches. Now, for the and, I just want to put a space. And there's a couple things I want to call out. When you put the managed property name, let me just zoom in here. When you put the managed property name and you have the colon and then you have the value that you want to match against, do not put spaces in between these two, right? If you put a space, it's going to screw up your results. You hear you hit apply and you may get mixed results, right? So just make sure that you're not putting the space in between the colon and the value that you want to filter on. The other gotcha, other thing to be aware of, if your value has a space in it, you want to wrap that value in single quotes. I think you can use double quotes or single quotes. If it doesn't have a space and you wrap it with single quotes, there's no harm, no foul. So if you want to just say, best practice, so that way you're always remembering, or you get into the habit of doing the single ticks, then you have that capability as well. All right. So now once we have that, we want to put a space between them. And I want to go with the other value that I want to filter on. And this is going to be the managed property that represents the Tesla category. And then again, I want to do a colon here. And then in this scenario, because target market does have a space in the value name, I need to wrap that in the single quotes. Now, once I have all of that wrapped, I should get, all right, so I should get the expected results, right? So now what I can do, I can go ahead and publish this out, and let me just kind of zoom out so we can kind of see this hand by hand. And I want to do a litmus test on, is this query pulling back the right documents? So in order to do that, I go to the source and I look at the document. So I filter, or I already have a filter on Cybertruck. So let me apply another filter on target market, and these are the expected results. And if I compare that against what I have here, I'm spot on, right? And here's another thing. When I first set these up, there was a time, like I paused this video and I tagged the documents, right? And then I came back. But I practiced putting this together before I resumed the video. And one of the things I noticed is that it took a while for these documents to show up, because what's happening behind the scenes, this is using search, right? So with search, and again, we don't control when things get indexed or when do we refresh, or when does the search pick up, or changes within our content of tagging. So it just took probably about 15 minutes for me to realize the entire result set. So this is going to be, as you're doing your configuration, be patient. If you're doing the litmus test and you're trying to compare the results on the source, the document library in this scenario, compared to what you're getting on the page, just understand that to get everything, especially if there are freshly tagged content, just give it some time for search to catch up and realize the results. All right, so now we have that under our belt. Let's just go to the Model S. And with the Model S, we want to do something very, very similar. So what I want to do, and of course, once you get your query, especially if you're doing a custom query, once you have that cemented in, it's probably a really good idea to save that like in a notepad or things along those lines, especially because this is going to be the same formula. It's going to be the same managed property names, different value, right? But managed property names. So instead of Cybertruck, we're going to put in Model S. So let me just copy this and start my new query. So this is just going to be Model S, and the Model S does have a space in it. So let me just put my single ticks in there. And then I want to back this all the way up, make sure I do an explicit space. And then for the category, and again, let's just flash back over to our document library. So if I filter this by Model S, my query is going to be a little bit different, because what I want for the Model S, I want to do a competitor analysis on the various models. But for my comparison, I don't want to compare the target market. I want to compare performance, right? So here in the Model S, let me filter on these documents by the Model S model, right? So I have them filtered by Model S. And then for the comparison type, I'm going after, for this particular page, performance, right? And I have this filter at the source so I can kind of get a sense of what to expect, just to ensure that I have my query correct. So now that I'm on the Model S page, let's just go ahead and create our section. Let's just throw a nice little background to kind of throw it off a little bit. And again, we talked through, it's not the document library, but rather the highlighted content web part. And from here, for simple filters, I can just say all sites, and document type is documents. And I'm not going to filter on which type of document. I'm going to manage property, TSL. filter on the tag where contains, again, we talked about using contains versus equals, and then Model S, right? And that's going to bring back the documents. We don't like that format. We want to do more of a list format. And because these are going to be meaty, you're going to get a bunch of results. I probably want to, just to balance the page a little bit, I probably just want to bring back the top 5. All right, so once I have that, I'm just go ahead and copy this, move my instance over here to the other half, give this a name, just call this the competitor models. All right, and then this one I want to name the performance competitors, right? And right now, because it's a copy, I didn't put in my custom query rule. So let me just query this. I am looking at all sites, and because I have this pasted here, I can copy it and paste it here. And I got my model right, but we want to compare. My comparison type, aka category, is going to be performance. And then I hit apply. Now once I do that, I should be able to go to the document library. And again, we're only doing the top 5. And I should be able to just spot check just to make sure that I'm getting what I expect. Right, so I have a Ferrari in there. I have, oh, there we go. I have a TL, SLS, NSX. So for the most part, I'm looking pretty good. And I know there's more, but I'm only grabbing the top 5. And I republish this, and now I'm all set. And the beauty of this, and again, we didn't talk about the sort order. So maybe I want to do, because that department is going to be doing this analysis, probably every other quarter or something like that. So what I want to do is when the sort by is recent, so any recent updates that they make, this page is automatically going to get the latest and greatest, right? And as you can see with this tagging, and if you have this $1 million information architecture strategy, a lot of this stuff is self-managed, right? So our news is self-managed. As our content managers come in here and start tagging news, this is going to be self-managed. If we open this up to say any news that's tagged with Model S, go ahead and put it here. That's going to be self-managed. And this solves a lot of requirements. I mean, just think about how this grows and how this expands out. Now you have people who are managing news on this particular model, and they're not bugging the Model S team that says, please post this on this site, please post this on your site, please post this on your site, right? So it's like, no, if you're doing a project against Model S, just put your announcements or your news on your Model S project site, tag it with this, our enterprise-wide tagging system, and I'm gonna automatically pick it up on my particular site, right? Because my scope is to look at every site and only filtering on news that's tagged with this particular model, right? The other scenario would be I'm in the Model S department and we're adding announcements, but hey, this is a big win or this is a big accomplishment that we have. I need this to be posted on the main homepage. So how do I do that? Basically, for each one of these articles, I'm gonna just go in and under the page details, I'm gonna flag it as a feature item, right? So by flagging this as a feature item on my main homepage, I can have a section that says, hey, these are hot and heavy from various areas or various departments within the organization. All right. So the last thing we need to tackle, just to make sure that we kind of round this off, because we talked about tagging news and the strategy behind that, tagging documents and the strategy behind that. But what's the case or the scenario for events? So long story short, it's not a good story, right? Is that everything else, all the other out of the box web parts are really prime and ready to go and have room for us to do these custom configuration options that are available to us. For events, on the other hand, they are pretty locked in. So let's just look at this events web part and see exactly what I mean by that. Here, it has the flexibility that we're used to select various sources. And that's refreshing, right? So I could do all sites, I can do a particular site collection, or I can focus on a particular event. In the event, I have multiple event lists on the same site. I can hone in and narrow focus on that. So my source is tight. The issue is this guy here. This only looks at the category column, which is an out-of-the-box column, which is a choice type column. Now, fair enough, I can manipulate the choice options as I can with any other choice column, right? So, but it's not centralized like our IA is setting the foundation for all the other elements. So it becomes a little kludgy, and it's just one of those things that you have to, for right now, work around. And that's the benefit of being in SharePoint Online and being on the evergreen, aka the modern side of SharePoint. This eventually probably will get updated. And it makes sense for them to do it, right? Them as in Microsoft, to update this section to where it has all the other capabilities that we have. We can choose a managed property, or they give us a filter capability to where we can build our own KQL, which is very beneficial and allow us the ultimate flexibility and still take advantage of the out-of-the-box UI, configuration options, audience targeting, right? So I think it's going to be a matter of time. And I know they have like that, what do you call it, the user voice. I think they did away with that. I think they have a different mechanism to where they gather feedback. But if enough of us vote on this, it says, hey, you have, for events, we really need KQL capabilities or managed property filtering capabilities, very similar to what you have for news and highlighted content web parts. Let's bring events into the fold, and we can get the most flexibility out of the events. But for right now, what we need to do, and it's not horrible, but it's just not perfect. It's not great. If I go to the site content section, and then right here under my events list, go to settings, and basically in this category column, and you have a ton, right? Because what they're doing, they're mixing and matching the legacy calendar view and capability, what we have like calendar and events and legacy SharePoint, with a modern UI front end. But for the modern UI front end, only this column out of all everything else that they have is configurable and flexible enough to be manipulated. Out of the box, you're going to get all of these anniversaries, meetings, and all this other good stuff. But we can easily replace that with our standard set of, in our scenario, models, right? And I'm just copying this from a notepad I have in another window. And basically what I can do now is manipulate this to have my standard set of models. And the pain becomes is that, okay, now I can go ahead and save that. And from a UI perspective, when I'm down to managing events, of course, I can come in here and give it, right? So I can give it a name, and then when it comes down to my options, this is where I can customize that piece. Unfortunately, this is the only place where you can customize the tagging of the events. And again, it's just one of those things where, you know, enough people start screaming that Microsoft listens, and they add in the capability to expand this out to managed properties or even KQL, right? So once I have this, you know, you tag it and you save the tag. Now from a consumption perspective, I can now go to my Model S site, and then here I can just tell it anywhere there's an event. And again, you know, from a source, I'm saying any site that has an event for Model S, let's go ahead and display it here. And I didn't pause the video. So, and again, this is that real world scenario where, you know, it just takes time for, you know, events being tagged and for the search to realize there's a change in the event, or there's a new event with a new tag, and it starts to surface these up. And again, it's limited, and I would say that the pain is that for each and every site, you will have to go in and remember to go to the event section, settings, modify that category column with your own list of tags, and then save it as such, right? And then of course you can set default values and all the other fun stuff. All right. So again, so for events, not the best story when it comes to tagging. It doesn't seem like we can take advantage of our information architecture, which is unfortunate. But it's evergreen platform, so eventually we'll get there. And who knows, by the time you see this video, it may be a capability, and you may be scratching your head like, Deshaun, what are you talking about? My screen looks different than yours. I see these options, and we're off to the races. All right. Hopefully this helps in seeing the flexibility that you have and the minimal effort that's needed really is a strategic approach, understanding and leveraging the content type hub as a vehicle to pull down common site columns, coming up with a strategy with the site column types to minimize those to what's actually needed, and creating a term set or a term hierarchical structure to where you can get the most flexibility out of that structure. And as you can see, if you define it one way at the content type hub and understanding the configuration options you have once you start to apply those to the lists and libraries, you can say, for this hierarchical term structure, I want to start it here at level 2. You have that capability. I want them the ability for to enter more than one, so you can do a multi-select. You have that capability. And then understanding that we only had 3 column types. Well, we added a 4th one just to kind of show the flexibility. But from a content manager perspective, there's really only 3 names that they're responsible for knowing, and that can be part of your training, and you're not burying them with all of these different column names. 3 column names you have to remember is featured, which is going to flag it, yes or no, in a elevated way. Is tag, which is going to be a more structured and rigid choice options, enterprise-wide. Common terms are used enterprise-wide, and you can use these in the context of news, events, well, not really events, news, items, documents, ... right? And it makes sense to keep those in the term store, giving you the flexibility to add options, and they get propagated across every site in the tenant, or deprecate options or rename options, and things, from a choice perspective don't break. Now, you may have to, if you go and rename, you may have to do configuration changes on the value that you're filtering on, because that's just a string term compared to a string term. It doesn't have the glue with the GUID that says, oh, this been updated to this name, so this match value, let me update that. It's not that smart, right? So it's going to be a literal comparison, but still it gives you a lot of flexibility in that maintenance story, leveraging the term store. And then our last option is the category field. And with the category field, you saw how we didn't define those options at the content type level, because what we wanted to do is set up a scenario to where the category name, because you see with the filter and the KQL and the managed property filters, again, limiting the column names that your content managers have to remember, but now the value is contextual, and that gives you a lot of flexibility on how you consume and how you tag, and still have a commonality with the site column name. So hopefully this was helpful. I'm tagging it the $1 million information architecture strategy, because I think you get a lot of mileage out of it. And you can go years, even decades with this one structure and solve a lot of business requirements and scenarios that you don't even have to think of now, because you have a nice solid foundation or base of an IA. Very simple, that you can get a lot of mileage out of. All right. Very interested in your thoughts and your understanding, feedback, comments. What are you doing that's working? How you may leverage this to probably pivot and structure and do something that new. And what are the pitfalls of having a super elaborate IA, right? Because the more options you have, the more confusion that gets generated, and where the inconsistencies over the time start to grow. Start simple, start, small handful of columns, in our scenario 3, and see how far you can go with that. All right. Until then, I guess I'll see you in the next video. Any questions, as always, leave me a feedback in the comment section. I'll talk to you soon.